welcome to the Wormhole Podcast, episode 85, bringing on an author and talking with them about one, occasionally more, of their books in detail. I'm Charlie Place, and today I am joined by Tasneem Abdur-Rashid, who is also a podcaster. More on that later. We'll be talking today about Finding Mr. Perfectly Fine. Zara, or North London Girl, as her email address suggests, but my awful accent doesn't, is 1 year away from 30, and so her mum has said she has a year to find a husband or else she's getting on a flight to Bangladesh to find one there. Her mum is strict but lovely too. So Zara does what plenty of modern women do. She signs up to an app. But it's when she goes to a Muslim networking Muslim singles event that she meets Hamza. He's not her type physically, but he's fun and they start to meet up occasionally. However, Zara's also talking to Mo from the app, who's yet to ask her to meet, and immature Adam, the nominal Muslim from work, has started to be less annoying. This book is a rom-com, but it also put me through the absolute ringer. The author is a master of twists and turns of miscommunication, all of which are totally believable. I lost 4 hours of sleep and had a late breakfast due to this book. It was worth all the tiredness. Oh my goodness, it was. Let's welcome this author already, and I will stop talking. Hello, Tasneem.
Hi, Charlie. Oh my goodness, what an introduction. That is hands down the best intro I've ever had. Thank you so much.
Can I ask you about the inspiration for your book? I know you got the inspiration years ago.
Yeah, so let's not go down the route of how old I am. But basically, when my friends and I kind of reached that age when our parents started looking for husbands for us, and, you know, we kind of went through similar things to what Zara goes through in the book. And as it was all happening, not just to me, but to my friends, to my cousins and people around me, I just thought to myself, you know what? There are so many stories here, and it's a story that's never been told before. You know, I need to do something with this. You know, I need to write this story one day. So that was when the seed was kind of sown over like 20 years ago. And surprisingly, and maybe not so surprisingly, no one actually ever did anything with it. So I kind of revisited the idea a few years ago. It was after I had my second child. I was kind of like in that haze of babyhood where the baby doesn't sleep, they're up all night, they're glued to you. I had a toddler at the same time. Things are really crazy and really monotonous as well. I was just going through washing and cleaning and feeding and nappies, and it was this endless cycle. And one night I just lay there awake thinking, you know what, I need to do something else. I can't just do this or I'm going to go crazy. And I whipped out my laptop at 3 o'clock in the morning. I reached over my baby's body as he nursed on me, and I just started writing the book that I'd been thinking about for, at that point, it'd been like 15 years in the making. But yeah, that's how it kind of came about.
So you said some stories that inspired this. Because this book is a rom-com, it gets me thinking, were there any kind of, I suppose, juicy stories or funny stories that you could tell us that inspired it?
Yeah, like loads of little bits and pieces. So, I mean, the whole setting is North London, it's Finsbury Park, it's where I was born, where I grew up. So all that is really, really familiar to me. And it's just something that I wanted to write about because, you know, it's home. And in terms of the stories and the things that Zara goes through, so the chocolate making event that happened to a friend, she went to a PwC networking event in inverted commas, which was, you know, thinly veiled Muslim matchmaking event where she met somebody, not Hamza, but, you know, someone a bit similar who she liked, but wasn't physically attracted to. The dentist who Zara meets, that's based on a true story of a friend who was also sent a questionnaire, you know, to fill in ahead of their meeting. And the whole thing about having to call the person up and reject them personally, that was something that had happened to my sister. So there's all like lots of different little bits and pieces throughout the book. There's characters who are inspired by real people in my life. But the main character, Zara, she's kind of like an amalgamation of lots of different people and lots of different things that myself and my community have experienced together, yeah.
Well, can you tell us more about Zara? And if we say Zara, Adam and Hamza, if we say all three of those, that's all right.
Yeah, of course. So Zara, I mean, she's not your stereotypical 29-year-old Muslim Bengali girl from London, because I don't think that such a stereotype even exists. There aren't maybe enough of us for that stereotype to be there. But she's a strong character, but she's been through a lot. So she's got some trauma that she's kind of dealing with. And at the beginning of the story, it's when she hasn't worked through it properly, because it's not like she's had any therapy or anything like that. But she's kind of at a good place in her life. The previous year had been really difficult for her. So we meet Zara where she's come out of this slump and come out of the darkness that she was in previously. And yeah, we see her at 29. She's ready to get married. She's ready to start looking. In fact, she's wondering why she hasn't found someone until this moment, and why it is her mom is trying to arrange someone for her. She thought she'd meet someone at uni. She thought she'd meet someone at work. All that hasn't happened. So she kind of lets her mom railroad her a little bit into this whole Bengali matchmaking scenario. Yeah, so she's a strong character, but she's definitely got her flaws. She's really indecisive. She's also the eldest child. She feels like she bears all this responsibility. She worries a lot about what people think. She worries about making everybody happy. She can't say no to people easily, which is why sometimes she finds herself in these difficult situations and kind of gets pulled along by the tide. She's got a good career. You know, she's actually happy in her career, which isn't something you often read in rom-coms. You often find people struggling in their career or wants a career change or isn't feeling valued. But no, she feels valued at work. She enjoys it. She's plodding along, but she's happy. She's happy where she is. So yeah, that's Zara. And then we've got Adam, who's her colleague, who up until recently she'd never, ever, ever even entertained. She thinks is immature and ridiculous and rude. But at the beginning of the book, they share some interesting moments. They get to know each other a little bit better. They spend more time together in and out of the office. And then she starts developing feelings for him. And then we've got Hamza, who is, you know, typically on paper, he seems like, you know, the perfect match for her, but that spark just isn't there. But she's kind of reluctant to say no just because of the spark, because, you know, she comes from a community where up until recently, up until the last generation, people were getting married to strangers, and that kind of spark grew, and it was something that developed. They got married first and then they let everything else develop. So she kind of thinks that, you know, maybe it's too soon to shut things down. After they get married, things could change. So yeah, that's like the main love triangle. And obviously there's a few other people along the way. There's who you mentioned, Mo, who she meets on the app, and there's the dentist who her parents try and set her up with. So yeah, there are little encounters along the way.
You said something that's made me remember something that I took from the book. And I mean, I don't know, maybe I did read this wrongly, but it seemed to me that obviously she's not been so successful up to this point. And yet where your book starts and when she starts thinking about it, there's just so many people in the background.
Yeah.
Obviously she's got the people from the app, she's got Adam, who I suppose we could say separately from the work colleagues, but then all of a sudden she finds out all the work colleagues apparently fancy her as well, and yeah, it's quite a lot of people really.
Yes, I think it's because she was in a bit of that, you know, a bit of a haze up until that point in the book where we meet her, where there's a bit more clarity. And I think it's also like things were going on at work with people fancying her, whatever. And she had no idea because she doesn't mix with her work colleagues. She'd always kept it very separate. They'd go out and she would never join them. And it's something that a lot of Muslim women like myself face in the workplace. You know, a lot of the socials revolve around drinking, which a lot of us just don't feel comfortable doing. So, you know, she doesn't feel comfortable going out to the pub after work and hanging out with everyone. So she's a bit isolated from everyone in that sense. So it's only when she starts hanging out with Adam that she finds out that actually people talk about her.
I was really just hoping someone was going to say, oh, that's a good point. Why don't we go to a coffee shop instead?
No one wants a coffee after work. Everyone needs a drink, you know.
Yeah, true. That is very true. Something that I really loved about this book and something that was apparent from the start. I mean, we say immature Adam. I mean, that phrase, immature Adam, is something that's stuck with me because the way you write it and your use of first person, and you kind of effectively break the fourth wall, although I suppose first person often can, but the specific way you do it, yeah, you're talking to the audience, you're constantly actively speaking to them. Can I ask about how you came to approach the narrative and writing itself?
You know what? I never actually approached it in like a scientific or even calculated way. I started writing the book, and this is what I do with everything that I write. I start writing first and I plan later. So I hadn't planned to have that kind of narrative, and I hadn't planned to address the audience either. I hadn't even realized I was actually doing it until I started my master's in creative writing. And at that point, the book was already finished. But in our first semester, we had to share some of our writing, and I shared a couple of chapters from Finding Mr. Perfectly Fine. And I remember getting the feedback from my peers after. And a couple of people, when I had addressed the audience, they're like, who are you talking to? And up until that moment, I hadn't actually realized that I was doing it. It just like getting into Zara's head and just telling her story just felt so natural. I felt like I was just channeling her and just talking rather than writing a book. So yeah, I hadn't actually planned on doing any of that. It just came about, and I enjoyed it. I really liked the tone, and I liked the fact that the tone kind of had a sense of familiarity. So even though the story, while it's familiar to people from my background, it's not really something that people outside my background have experienced themselves. So I think the tone helps with that familiarity, and you kind of really feel like you're getting into Zara's head and into her world and learning about her family and her culture and everything.
Okay, right. So this is part of, because I know you've written this book both for Bengali Muslims and Muslim people in general, obviously, but you've also, I suppose, had to have an eye for other cultures, other people, etc. This is where you start with the balance of trying to get it accessible to everybody then, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I really didn't want the book to be limited to only people from my culture or from my religion, because I feel like that whole looking for somebody, looking for love is such a universal thing that everybody goes through, man, woman, other, everybody kind of wants to feel loved by somebody else. And at some point in our lives, we all want to kind of just find a person to hang out with and just have that kind of companionship. It might come at different stages of our lives, and maybe in our culture it's expected from us a little bit sooner, but I think it's a universal challenge. So I really wanted that essence to come through as well, because it's something that we can all relate to. And I was hoping that even though the story is about a different culture and about, things that might be alien to mainstream readers, I was hoping it was something that people would be able to kind of resonate with regardless. I mean, you tell me, what did you think when you read it? Did you feel like, oh my God, this is crazy, I can't relate to it at all? Or are there bits that you could relate to?
No, I related to it. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think you kind of think, well, okay, this is going to be different, and you just read it and you take it in
Yeah.
and you understand it from there. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And I guess that's how people like me have been reading literature as well from the beginning, reading, because up until recently, actually, we didn't have many books written by people like myself, especially not in this genre. I think writing rom-coms from a South Asian British perspective is something really, really new. Up until maybe the last 5 years, there wasn't anything. There were stories about partition, and there's a lot of like really depressing things about abuse and all that kind of sad narrative, and all of that has been there for a while, but nothing fun. There's nothing fun, and that's what I really wanted to do. I wanted to write something fun that honored my culture, but at the same time told an interesting story.
Yeah. Yeah, you say it, there's darkness and there's like war things.
Arranged marriages that are like forced marriages, really, and there's a lot of sadness out there, a lot of darkness out there, and I just felt like it got to a point where that's all we were, or that's the only part of our stories that were being told, and it doesn't show like a well-rounded version of who we are as a community, and I just really wanted to break that down a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Well, it's nice that there isn't that big, oh, this is different anymore.
Yeah.
That's effectively what it does. So yeah, no, it's great. I'm going to have to ask you something that I would really like to know a bit more about. I think I've read or I've heard you started first writing on a computer, I believe, when you were 10 years old. Your dad gave you your computer.
Yeah.
This just sounds incredibly lovely. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah. So, oh my gosh, I was in year six. And it was back in the days. So how old was I? 10? Yeah, I was 10 years old. So we're talking 1993, right? And this is back when no one had computers, like no one had computers at home. I think one of my cousins, they got one, but no one in my school had one, and no one in my class certainly. And my dad bought one, and I was in year six. And I remember he came home with this brand new computer. It was by a brand called Olivetti. I have no idea what that is now. And he set it up in my room. And he set it up and he said, look, this is for you to write stories on. Everyone knew, like, all I ever did was read. And we had no TV, we had no TV growing up. My parents thought TV was a waste of time, and it was just distracting us from important things like schoolwork. And they chucked our TV out when I was a little bit younger than that. So all I did was read and write as well. And I used to write stories, obviously, by hand. So he bought me this computer, and it was the best thing, and I just felt so proud to have that. And the fact that it was in my room and I was the gatekeeper, to the computer, it was really empowering. And yeah, that's how I started writing. And I wrote so many stories. I remember I had written this whole series called Naughty Nora about this girl who was always up to mischief. I read a lot of Enid Blyton growing up, right? So I read, yes, I'd written a lot of books, adventure books for children when I was younger. I wish I had them. I really wish I still had them. They've like obviously disappeared into the ether, but yeah.
So you've possibly got children's fiction in your future then, maybe.
You know what, I would love to. Like my kids keep asking me, like my elder son, he's 9 now, and he keeps saying, Mama, when are you gonna write a children's book? So I've actually written a YA. So I've written a YA. So it's not quite children's, but I've gone down a little bit in terms of the age range. And that's on submission at the moment. So my agent's currently pitching it to publishers. So fingers crossed something comes out of it, because I love that story. I think it's such a, I'm not, I know I'm blowing my own horn here, but I think it's such a brilliant story. And it's the book I wish I had when I was a teenager. I wish I had something like this instead of all the Sweet Valley Highs that I was consuming, which was great, but it would have been nice to have a bit of diversity as well. But yeah, I think I would love to write a children's book one day. Absolutely. I mean, and back to the thing about my dad buying me this computer, it didn't end there. Like when I started writing this book, and as I mentioned before, I was a mom and I had 2 little kids and I was just so busy. And then my dad would be like, when are you going to finish your book? And I'll be like, Dad, I've got no time. Like I'm writing at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm falling asleep as I'm doing it. Like I've literally got no time. And then he paid for Yusuf, my little one, to go to nursery so I could write. And, not many people do that. Not many parents support their children to this degree. And I'm just really lucky and really grateful. Yeah, really grateful to my dad for believing in me.
That's lovely. I think, yeah, if you write a series of books, every single one of them has to be dedicated to your dad then, definitely.
Oh man, that was just going to piss my mom off. She's like, here we go again. Oh, my dad, this and that. It's all about your dad. What about me? I taught you how to read. I'm like, that's true. You did. Well, apparently, I could read from when I was 2.5. Is that true? I don't know. But my mom swears that it was true.
Oh, it's possible, I think. Yeah.
I don't know. Having had 2.5 year olds at one point, they could barely even talk. So I'm like, really?
Okay, then another series. You got 2 series, and one for dad, one for mum.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this book, if I remember rightly, it was originally double the length. Now, obviously, there's going to be lots of stuff in that. I realise you can't talk about everything. But is there anything particular that you cut that we might like to know about? I suppose any characters or that kind of thing.
You know what? It's really funny you said that, because I've just realized that when I talked about seeing things that were true in the story, I think I mentioned something that got cut out, like the whole she had to call the guy and to reject him. I think I cut that out.
Yeah.
But you know what? I didn't cut anything major. The story originally had Zara meeting loads of different people. So she did every single thing, but that's what I stripped back the most. So I had other events that she went to, like she goes to a Muslim Riva event. So that's an event for people who become Muslim, so converts basically. There are sometimes events specifically for them to find spouses. So she goes to one of those. She meets a guy there and he's a convert, he's English, he's white, and there's a whole another storyline about him in that. And then there was another one where the guy came to their house. So she meets a guy at a wedding, a really rude guy at a wedding. Yeah, I kept that in. But that had a different storyline about that. So he basically comes back as a proposal that had come through her parents. And there's the whole thing when they come to your house and they meet you and you have to serve tea and you have to do like jump through all these hoops. And yeah, I had a lot more guys in it, the first edit. There's at least 4 other potentials. And when it came to having to cut it down, the reader at my agency, Salma, she was like, look, just get rid of all the extra stuff, because when I was reading it, I just wanted to get to the main story. I just wanted to hear what Adam was doing or what Hamza was doing. That was really good advice, because up until that point, when I was told to cut the words down, I had no idea, how I was going to cut, 70,000 words out the book. But that really helped. So I just literally went through it and I just got all these extra side characters and I chopped them all out. I nearly chopped Mo out, because it was still on the hefty side and my agent was like, get rid of him. Then I was like, you know what? I can't have a book about Muslim dating without talking about online dating. Like that is primarily the main way people find anyone now. So I had to. I was like, there's no way I can take that out. I had to squeeze it in. But it was all right, because my editor was really nice. And she was like, yeah, have more words. It's fine. If it makes the story progress or if it develops Zara's character, you can keep it in. Oh, and by the way, how could I forget Mr. Piccadilly Line? There was a whole thing with him. He was the biggest change. The guy that she meets on the Piccadilly Line, that was a huge plot, like a massive, massive plot. Getting rid of him cut out at least 20,000 words. There was a lot going on, basically. There was too much going on. But you know what? Don't worry. I've saved bits for other books, and it's all going to come back one day, and it's all going to be reincarnated somehow.
I'll hold you to that, because I was thinking that you've got a lot there that could be turned into something, I don't know, box set or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk about the differences between different cultures, the different Islamic cultures.
Okay.
Because I've seen reviews that talk about this.
Yeah.
How things are different than what the reader thought they would be, and they're saying, "Oh, we don't do this, we don't do that." And of course, it's your experience as a British Bengali Muslim. Did you worry about how different Muslim readers from different cultural backgrounds would take your book?
Yeah, I did actually. That was really at the forefront, especially when I was editing the book. Because when I first started writing the story, the whole thing about own voices and representation, they're all very new conversations. But when I had got to the end of writing the book and I was editing it and getting it ready for publication, these were all topics that were quite hot. And I spoke to people a lot. I spoke to other writers. I reached out to other writers on Instagram, talked to them about their experiences. And the conclusion from myself and most people was that you're never going to be able to represent 1.9 billion Muslims. You're not going to be able to. You shouldn't even try to do that. We shouldn't even have to. Like, for example, if I was a white writer, would I even think of trying to represent every single white person out there? No, but I wouldn't, because we're not all a monolith. You know, everyone's so different. So where we may share skin color, we may share religion, doesn't mean that we share the same values, experiences, or even culture. So I think at one point I just had to realize that, you know what, there are going to be people who will read this and be like, oh, this is completely wrong, we don't do things like that. And that's okay, because that's their experience. And you know what it is, I think, you know, a Muslim woman writing about romance is still so new that when other Muslim readers read it, they just want to find something that they can connect with. They want to read it and be like, oh my God, that's exactly what happens to me. So I think there might be instances where somebody will read and be like, oh, actually, that's not what happens to me. And they might feel disappointed about that, you know, and I'm sorry, but I can't represent everybody. And I just hope that publishing continues to become more and more diverse and just welcomes more writers from different backgrounds, so that everybody has a chance to read books, you know, they feel seen in. But you know what's been overwhelming is the messages from people who have felt seen, especially people from like a Sylheti background, because up until this point, there had been a few books by Bengali writers like Monica Ali, for example, but firstly, she's half Bengali, and secondly, the part of Bangladesh she's from, Dhaka, culturally and linguistically is completely different to Sylhet. So Dhaka is the capital, right? And Sylhet is a massive, massive city, but we speak a complete different language to people in Dhaka. So people had read Bengali in a book before, but they'd never read the Sylheti dialect in a book. And I had so many messages from other Sylheti women, because Sylheti doesn't even come in a written form, you know? So to have it written out in a book in English with English letters, but Sylheti, it's just madness. And it was just so exciting for people to have that. So I'm really happy that people got that chance to experience that in a book.
I'm going to have to ask you on that. You say it hasn't got a written language or anything?
No, so it's spoken. So Sylheti is a dialect, so it's just purely spoken. So like in Sylhet, for example, in school, they'll learn how to read and write in the formal Bengali. And on the news and that kind of thing, it's all formal Bengali, but what's spoken at home is a completely different dialect altogether. And you don't use that to write with. For example, like from Dhaka, if you want to ask, how are you? You say, Kemon acho, how are you? Whereas in Sylheti, we won't even say, how are you? We'll say, Bala asoni, like, are you okay? So it's completely different. But obviously there are some similarities and there are similar words and stuff like that. But in terms of the whole structure of a sentence itself, my friends from Dhaka don't even understand it when they hear Sylheti people speak, and vice versa.
Goodness. Okay, wow. I wish we could talk more on that. That's very interesting. So there's another thing that struck me as I was reading, and also, again, it was something that people were talking about. Zara's sister, Yasmin, I believe it is, she puts on a hijab. Her mum gets her to put on a hijab to hide her beauty. And at first I was like, oh, okay. I didn't know what was going on so much. And then you think about it and you read more. And obviously this is interesting, I suppose, because the idea is to make her not attractive.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we've got Zara's family who don't wear hijab.
Yeah.
You yourself wear hijab.
Yeah.
And I suppose I just wanted to ask why you decided to write these characters, and maybe this, if we say this situation in particular, as you did.
Yeah, because it happens. And it's so funny how, like, after I wrote the book, so many people got in touch with like, oh my God, that's exactly what happened to me. Like we went to this event and then my mum made my sister put a scarf on her head because she didn't want anyone to look at her. She wanted them to look at me. Or someone came round to our house. And, you know, it happens, especially in the Bengali community. It happens a lot. Like I've got friends who don't wear hijab, but when they go to visit their mother-in-law, for example, they'll wear it. Because just out of respect. In this situation, Zara's sister Yasmin, she wears it. And it's not about just the fact that she's wearing a hijab. She doesn't wear it stylishly. So like, I don't know, not at this present moment as you're looking at me, but in general, I think that when I wear hijab, I wear it stylishly, I wear makeup, I take care about my clothes, like think about my outfits. And I think she doesn't do that. Yasmin doesn't do that. So she intentionally wears no makeup. She wears her hijab in a way that is the least attractive for her facial structure. She wears really dowdy clothes. She wears clothes that are not even hers, that are way too big for her. And she just tries everything to make herself look unattractive. So I think in that scenario, it's not about she wore a hijab. Yeah, she did. But she also did all these other things that are out of character on the instruction of their very, you know, dominant mother, to deflect any kind of attention away from her and solely on Zara. And you know what? It happens. It's not something that I just created out of nowhere. It's things that have happened to my friends. It's things that have happened to my cousins, you know. But I do know what you're referencing. There have been comments being like, oh my gosh, that's so offensive. She wears a hijab and she makes a mockery out of it. Well, no, it's not about that. It's just something that happens. And there's loads of little stories in this book about uncomfortable things that happen throughout the process of finding someone to marry and things that your parents make you do. And this is one of them.
Mm-hmm. And you say, yeah, I mean, you wear something every day, you work it, don't you, effectively? You know, you fit it to your clothes, you get used to it as part of you. So yeah, the difference there. So I found it really interesting that Zara doesn't think for herself about how Hamza is.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got, I think it's the cousin in Dubai, whose name escapes me right now. And I want to say it's Yasmin.
The cousin is Sabina.
Okay, yes, Sabina. And there's also someone else. And that's where I want to say it's Yasmin, but I can't remember. But they say to Zara, hey, he seems a bit controlling. And it was interesting that Zara, towards the end, basically, I mean, if Hamza hadn't put the brakes on it, she'd have gone and married him.
Would have, yeah.
Yeah, and she doesn't really see that part of him. Was it, I suppose, a conscious decision to have Sabina and, as I said, I think it might be Yasmin, but I can't remember, talk about this, but not Zara herself as such?
Yeah, it did come as a conscious decision because, I mean, I didn't go too much into it, but toxic masculinity, I think, is toxic. And I think sometimes when you're in this situation where you're kind of verging on desperate to settle down because you've got a deadline and the deadline is looming closer, and you see something that just looks so perfect on paper, it's really easy to turn a blind eye to other things and put it down to like romance or being spontaneous, or, you know, I mean, take 50 Shades of Grey, for example. We have a psycho stalker who breaks into somebody's house and does God knows what to her, and everyone thinks that's romantic. You know what I mean? So I think I really wanted, not to that degree, but I wanted to touch upon the fact that sometimes things appear romantic, but they might not be romantic. You know, it was controlling of Hamza, and it was a bit dominating of him to just keep showing up in places where he wasn't invited. But because Zara, firstly, she's inexperienced. There's only her ex, Tariq, who she was engaged to, as a reference point, and that's it. So I think what other people could see, she couldn't. So people like Sabina, for example, you know, she's been married for ages, she's older, she's got a lot more life experience. She doesn't really know Hamza. So seeing what was happening from her viewpoint, you know, it was neutral. So she could see that, hang on a second, this behavior isn't quite normal. Whereas Yasmin, obviously, because she's rationalizing it against who she thinks she knows Hamza to be, has kind of normalized it and thought, okay, it's a bit annoying and it's a bit pushy, but, you know, he's just being romantic because he's actually a good person. So she kind of keeps rationalizing it. And to be honest, this whole going along with getting married to somebody, even if they don't feel quite right for you, is something that happens so much. It's happened to so many people. Like, I don't know if you've listened to my podcast, but one of the episodes Was My Husband Gay? And the woman in that episode, she went and married somebody who had so many red flags beforehand, and married them regardless because she was 36 and everybody was telling her that you're too old and you're never going to get married and you got to hurry up. And she just ignored all these red flags and then got married to somebody who it seems to everybody that he's probably gay, but hiding it because of the culture and all of that. So it happens a lot. And yeah, and I did want to kind of touch upon that.
I thought it was interesting. I suppose you can see how it does kind of happen, that you're thinking it's nice, it's nice, it's nice. And then at the same time, it gets quite a lot more worrying, especially like when he turns up in Dubai. Yeah, you kind of miss it in a way as well. Yeah.
You do. And it's really interesting because I was at an event with somebody and their daughter was there. And we were talking about the book, and she's got a 15-year-old daughter. And we were talking about this whole showing up unannounced, playing that thing, on Is He a 10?
Yeah, you've got a great TikTok video on this. I loved it.
So see that video? Do you see the video of the girl? And I'm like, he's a 10, but he shows up unannounced. And she's like, what? He's still a 10. That's romantic. So we had this whole conversation about it afterwards. And her mother and I, obviously the same age, and we were of one step viewpoint, and she's a lot younger. She's 15 years old. And she just totally thought it's romantic to show up at people's events and houses and different countries and everything. And she just thought it was really romantic. So I think it is a really interesting conversation. And is it a generational thing? Is there something in today's culture that makes Gen Z think that all this kind of behavior is acceptable? Is it what they're consuming? I don't know. But it was definitely an interesting conversation.
Mm-hmm. Or I suppose, is it as you grow up as well?
Yeah, as you grow up, that's so true. It could just be that, once you've got more experience and you've met, a wider variety of people and a lot more wisdom, I guess, to kind of know the difference.
You mentioned Tariq earlier in this conversation. Why was it important to include this whole plot line and everything that happens to Zara?
I didn't intentionally put that in to make a point or anything. As I was writing her character, I just felt that her lack of confidence, the way she kind of lets people kind of direct her life a bit, that stemmed from somewhere. Because, she's an attractive girl, she's got a good education, she's got a decent job, she's got a good family. Like, why does she do this? Why is she so unsure and uncertain? And why can't she make up her mind? And I thought about that a lot, and I did a lot of research. And then I was talking to a friend actually who was telling me a story about a friend of hers. It was a bit different, but they met some guys and they were just having fun and whatever, and everything was fine until she got into the backseat of his car and things kind of went out of control. In that situation, unfortunately, the friend of a friend was raped. And she couldn't even tell anybody about it because she would have been completely ostracized from her community if she had. She would never get married. Her parents would never be able to show their face. Everybody would just blame her for getting in the backseat of that car. And that conversation, while I was just planning out Zara's character, kind of hit me. And I thought, you know what? This is something that I'd like to kind of touch upon. The fact that things happen and it's hidden and it's masked and we're too scared to talk about it, and the impact it has on your own self-esteem and the choices that you make further along the line as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry to hear that it's got a basis in fact.
Yeah.
On Adam,
yeah,
who is obviously involved in the revelation of this and helping Zara get around what happened with Tariq. Could the issues of mismatching values between Adam and Zara, could they be worked out? Because I wasn't sure if they could.
You know what? I think it's such a complicated situation, and I think there are cases where it can be worked out, and there are cases where it can't. And I think in Zara's case, she was just too scared of taking that leap of faith only to wind up 10 years down the line at the same point. Because I feel like, and she felt like, you need to marry people and accept them for who they are, not who you hope they're going to grow into and become. And it's really interesting because since the book coming out, I've had so many people and a lot older women as well saying, oh, why couldn't she have just got together with Adam? He was so cute. He was so nice. And I'm like, hello, what about all those massive differences? They're like, oh, no, she could have changed him. She could have changed him. And I just feel like, I don't know, people place such a big responsibility and an onus on women to take a bad boy and reform him. And when it's not really her job to do that, and can she even do that? And does he even want to be changed? And is it even okay to try and change somebody? There's all of that. So I personally think that at that moment in their lives, their differences were just too big. and they would cause too many issues in their future. I feel like marriage is hard enough anyway. You've got two people from two different lives coming together, trying to create a whole new family. And I think that's really, really hard. And if you add to it all these other differences and complications, I mean, they couldn't even have a conversation about her not wanting to go to the pub without it becoming a full-blown thing.
True.
You know, so how are they going to get married? What are they going to do when it's time to like raise their children, when it's time to go to the mosque, when it's time to pray, when it's time to fast, you know, about eating, what they're going to eat, halal food, haram food, alcohol, no alcohol. There's just so much. And I just felt like at that moment in their lives, they just weren't compatible in that sense. Maybe in the future they would be. Maybe she'd relax a bit, maybe he'd become a little bit more practicing, and then maybe they would find a middle ground that worked for them. But at that point, I don't think they were suitable for each other.
There'd have to be some level of compromise, yeah.
Yeah. And they didn't know. They'd never had a proper conversation about their feelings until right before she's about to marry someone else. So I think if they had dated and they were together for a while, these were things they could have talked about. But she was in such a rush, and he was like, I'm not in any rush at all. Like, yeah, let's just see how it goes, and then we'll see how it goes. And she kind of needed something concrete.
No, sure.
Were you rooting for Adam and Zara?
When you said about other people saying about Adam, my mind went straight to the scene with the motorcycle.
Yeah.
Because that scene is, let's face it, it's hot.
Yeah.
And there isn't a scene like that with Hamza. So in that way, I was like, okay, now I absolutely want you, Tasneem, to take this to the end and for her to get with Adam. At the same time, though, it's a very good point that Zara needs someone that's stable. I think you make the point that it's not just about love. Love is obviously very important, but you've got to think about other things. And so I suppose I was happy, I think, for you to have her marry Hamza, because that would have worked for what she was looking for in other respects. I suppose also there was this low level, oh, maybe she needs to get with Adam, is this going to happen? And then the marriage doesn't happen, and yeah, okay, I was secretly happy.
I think that's what's interesting, because I feel like even you and even myself, as I was writing it, I just wasn't sure where it would end up. Like, I didn't write the book with the ending planned out. When Adam and Hamza came into the scene and into the story, I just thought, you know what? I don't know who she's going to end up with yet. Let's just see how it goes, and then I'll figure it out by the end. And it was up until the last moment, I was umming and ahhing over which one, if any, she should end up with. And it was, I left it really late in the day because I was so unsure myself. And in the end, I just had to go with my gut and what I felt that the characters, you know, would have done in that situation.
I saw it as a possibility as you got towards the end that she would end up with neither of them. And I like that you chose that, even though obviously we've got a bit of a possibility.
A bit outraged because it's a rom-com. What kind of rom-com doesn't have a happily ever after? That's like a rubbish rom-com, you know? So yeah, there was a bit of outrage, but it just made sense to me. I just felt like it wasn't fair for her to end up with either of them. And to be honest, if she had ended up with Hamza, there would have been a lot of people disappointed. And if she had ended up with Adam, there would have been people disappointed too. But either way, you're going to disappoint people. So you're just going to have to go with what makes sense to your story. Like, my sister literally read it and then she phoned me and she was like, what the hell was the point?
Well, did you have a preference?
I do have a soft spot for Adam, but I felt like, yeah, that's only because he's hot and funny, you know, and he looked after her. Really, would he make a good husband? I don't know. With the knowledge that I have now, would I pick somebody like Adam? Probably not. I would probably pick stability and security over fun motorcycle rides through London, you know, now. But I'm like old. 20 years ago, I wouldn't have picked that. I would have picked Adam any day. So even I was confused who she should end up with.
Will Hamza find someone, do you think?
There's going to be so many people who'd be happy to marry somebody like Hamza, 100%. He's, you know, he's tall, he's got all his hair, he's got a really good job, he's got loads of money, he's got a really lovely family, he's got his own property. Like, you write it all down. And he's a nice guy. Yeah, he's a bit controlling. He just needs somebody who can match his energy. And he's a happy kind of guy as well. Like, there's so much going for him. I'm sure there'll be loads and loads of people who would be happy. And that's another thing. Like, I wanted Hamza to take control of his story as well. When I was writing it, I was thinking, should Zara break up with Hamza the night before and be like, look, I can't do it. I like somebody else. Like, I can't do this. Should she do that? And then I just thought, you know what? It's not fair to Hamza either. It's just not fair to him. So him doing what he did was his own journey as a character. It was him not allowing himself to keep being pushed around by Zara as well, and just listening to everything she has to say and just believing it all and just going with the flow just because he likes her so much. It was him taking control of his own destiny as well.
Sure. I mean, okay, we've talked about the controlling nature and things like that, but there is just something so winsome about him, about how forgiving he is and how accepting.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, the scene where Zara and Adam see Tariq in the club, obviously that's quite high emotions and stuff like that. But then you contrast it with how Hamza was, and he just kind of takes it in and accepts it. I don't think there's a question here, but I liked how you've kind of effectively got an exploration there of the two different ways of dealing with it. Neither of them wrong, neither of them, neither of them amazing, neither of them wrong. But yeah, just the level of forgiveness and acceptance that he has.
Up until that point, exactly. Because you know what? I really wanted to explore that intentionally as well, because I feel like so much of the rom-coms we consume, you see something where the girl or the guy does something really terrible and they forgive you, like she'll cheat on him and he'll forgive her at the end and be like, oh, it's okay, I love you too. And life doesn't work like that. People don't always get forgiveness. So with Hamza, when he found out about that, that was his line. Like she'd crossed that line and he just couldn't get over it. It didn't matter that it was the morning of their nikah, that he just could not get over that. And that was him, like putting his foot down and showing that he does have his own standards and boundaries and everything as well. And I think it's important because I feel like, especially when you've not had a lot of relationships and you base most of your knowledge of relationships from popular culture, you kind of tend to think, oh, as you mess up, you just get forgiven, like how you do on TV and songs. You hear songs like, I don't want to know if you're playing me, keep it on the low. What do you mean I don't want to know? What guy doesn't want to know if he's being cheated on by his girl? That's a lie. It's all a lie, right? So I just wanted to kind of look into that and show that the consequences of the shit that you do.
Mm-hmm. There is a question, I suppose, that should be, is there going to be a sequel? I'm going to be cheeky. I'm going to say, when is this sequel? Because there's absolutely got to be one.
Firstly, there's no sequel.
Damn it.
But, in the next book that I've written, the one that's coming out next year, hopefully February, there will be a cameo. And you're going to see Zara and you're going to see what happened to her next.
All right.
I think that will give you and everyone a little bit more closure, especially as how things ended in the book. Yeah, I think you'll get your closure from that.
I suppose the question is, how many years in the future then from...
I think it's 2 years in the future, 2 or 3 years in the future. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not for way in the future. You're not going to see her as an old lady. That would be just weird, especially if you just read the book the other day. What the hell was this? How does that make sense? But no, so it's just a couple of years in the future. And my main character in this book, her name's Maya. She's going to go somewhere and she's going to run into Zara and they're going to meet and they're going to talk. And you're going to find out. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good.
Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah, that will do. Yeah. So, someone else, Amina.
Yes.
The sister.
Oh, don't you just love Amina?
I do. Do you think you might ever get to a book about her? And
I do love her. I was thinking of doing something, with her in the future because I just find her hilarious. And she's totally based on somebody I know as well. I don't think they even realize I've based it on them. She's done a pretty good job hiding it. But yeah, like her character, the way she's so high strung and she's so passionate and she gets upset over everything, but she's really loyal at the same time and she's got really firm values. I think she's a great character. Can I sustain a whole book on her? I don't know. Let's see if the opportunity comes up or if I can think of a good enough story.
I think you can definitely do it, yeah.
Yeah.
Given that then, we better talk about this new book. This is the one that you've just finished. I think you've finished edits for it.
Yeah, so I've just handed in the first round of structural edits. So usually what happens is you write the book and you'll go through a structural edit first, and then you'll go through like a copy edit, and then you'll go through like a line edit and then a proofread. You're lucky if you've only got 4 edits. Finding Mr. Perfectly Fine had loads more because obviously my agent edited it first before, like 3 times before it even got sent to publishers. But this one, you're just working straight with your publisher and your editor at the publisher, so it cuts out all those stages. Anyway, sorry, that's all boring writer stuff.
No, it's interesting.
Okay, so it's also a rom-com. It's also set in North London, but a little bit further north. We got in Turnpike Lane this time, yeah. So like 3 stops further on the Piccadilly line. And yeah, so my character Maya, she's an introvert. She's got one younger brother called Malik. She's from a very, very simple family. Her mum's a TA. Her dad works in social services for Tower Hamlets Council, really hardworking. And she's a paralegal. And she kind of spends every weekend meeting up with her best friend. They go for dinner. And that's pretty much as exciting as her life gets until she meets a guy on the train. He starts talking to her. They have this amazing conversation and they really connect. And she just can't believe that this hot guy is talking to her on the train and stuff, right? And then suddenly they get to Piccadilly Circus and he jumps up and he's like, I've got to go. This is my stop. Call me. And he jumps off the train, right? And then she's like, what the hell? He's just gone and I don't have his number. What do you mean call you? We haven't even exchanged numbers because they were so like deep in conversation that they hadn't even got that far yet before he reached the stop. Anyway, so she's feeling absolutely gutted that this guy's got off the train. So anyway, in his haste, he had dropped a notebook. So she picks up the notebook. She takes it with her to work. She shows her friends at work, tells them what happened. And she's like, look, he dropped this notebook. What do I do? Do I open it? It's a proper invasion of his privacy. Like, how can I just look in his notebook like that? And her friends are like, look, he's a grown-ass man. He's not a 13-year-old teenager. This is not Adrian Mole. There's not going to be his feelings and stuff in this notebook. It's probably just meeting notes. Just open it. Maybe there'll be some kind of clue and you can find him again. So she does. She kind of lets them push her into opening up this notebook. And inside she finds a list of 30 things that this guy's going to do before he turns 30. So on each page, there's a different item. And then he's done like a lot of these things on the list. So what they decide, her and her friends decide, is that she's going to start doing the things on the list. So partly hoping that she'll run into him. So this guy's a personal trainer, right? They established that on the train. So he's going to do a triathlon and they're like, oh my God, you need to go to that. And look, he's written down the ones he's interested in. You need to show up and maybe you'll find him again. So meanwhile, her best friend just become pregnant. So she feels as if everyone's moving on without her. So she thinks, you know what, I'm going to start doing everything on the list. It will get me trying out different things. And if I'm lucky, I'll meet him in the process. So she starts doing all the stuff on the list. It's like a self-discovery journey, but way more fun than that because there's all this fun stuff happening at the same time.
Sounds good. I so want to ask you if she ends up with a train guy, but I know we can't go there.
You're going to read it hopefully next year. And yeah, then we're going to have another chat all about this one.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I look forward to it. I'm going to ask you a random question. North London, does it have the best Turkish restaurants then?
Oh my God, what kind of question is that? Have you not been to Green Lanes? Oh my days. Why didn't we do this interview in Green Lanes? It would have been so much better. Turkish food is like amazing. And in North London, it's probably even better than a lot of places in Turkey, to be honest. And I'm saying that through experience. Yeah, please, you have to go to Green Lanes. It's around the corner from where Zara lives. And there's like loads and loads of Turkish restaurants and grocery shops and dessert shops. And yeah, it's absolutely banging. You have to try it out.
Is there a particular restaurant then? Maybe the one that Zara goes to?
So the one her and Adam have been to a couple of times and she goes to with Hamza, that's in an area called Wood Green, which is also on the Piccadilly line, and it's called Capital. It was really great at the time of writing that book. Now I feel like it's gone down a little bit. My current favourite is one called Hala on Green Lanes. So yeah, Hala's my favourite. I feel like they've got their flavour on point. But other good ones are like obviously got Kyuzu, that's a classic. There's quite a few in London, but the original ones are there in North London in Green Lanes. There's one called Antepila, which has the best kunafa, which is like this Turkish dessert. And yeah, that road is great. If you ever come to London, we'll go there.
I'm all for that. That sounds good. If this is making you hungry, people, Tasneem's Instagram is full of food that you make yourself, I think, Tasneem, as well. It looks amazing.
Thank you. You know what? I feel so bad because I put up all these food pictures and everyone's like, give me the recipe, give me the recipe. And I'm like, girl, I ain't got no recipe. It's all like created with whatever's available at hand at that moment. But I would love to. I would really, really love to one day have some kind of recipe book or something up there. Because I don't know if you noticed in Finding Mr. Perfectly Fine, there's a lot of food. And I didn't notice there was a lot of food because food is such a big part of my lifestyle and my family and us getting together and having a good time. It's all about food. So that was in the story. And I didn't realize until a friend read it and she was like, oh my God, it's just all about food. So yeah, that was not intentional. But yeah, I'm a massive foodie. I'd love to like do something with that, write a book about it one day.
Yeah, fantastic. Would be fabulous. So this podcast then that is hopefully going to come back, Not Another Mum Pod. Tell us about it.
So Not Another Mum Pod was born originally as a lockdown project. So my friend Nafisa and I, Nafisa called me up one day and she was like, look, lockdowns happened, we're stuck at home, but I need to do something, and I really want to do something about telling stories, and you're a storyteller, do you want to kind of get involved with me? And I was like, hey, yeah, why not? I mean, yeah, I work full time and I'm doing my master's part time, and I'm writing Finding Mr. Perfectly Fine as well, and I've got all my kids and whatever, but yeah, let's do it, let's do this podcast. And yeah, so it kind of stemmed from that point, and it was all about bringing unrepresented voices and untold stories to the fore, and giving women a platform to share their own stories, and just really kind of opening doors to those conversations that not everyone has. And we've had some really, really good episodes. We've won an award. We won the Muslimah Bloggers Award. We've been in the Apple top 10 charts a few times, so it's all going really well. We haven't had an episode in a while, but that's not because it's over. It's just because we've been really, really busy, and I don't know, we need to kind of recalibrate. But yeah, we're planning season 2, and we've got some really good stories that are going to be shown. Hope you enjoy that as well.
Good. And it's basically lying dormant for now. If you can get back to it, definitely. Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
So thank you very much, Tasneem, for coming today. It has been wonderful, and I am so looking forward to this next work. Listeners, there will be links to the various things we talked about and Tasneem's Instagram and TikTok. They are worth checking out as well. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a great conversation, an absolute honour. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Do join me next time. And for more information as to upcoming authors, check out wormholepodcast.com. The Wormhole Podcast, episode 85, was recorded on the 17th of July and published on the 23rd of October 2023. Music and production by Charlie Place.